Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I had to start talking so Johnny would sit down. Thanks for joining us for our first Contemporary Military Forum this afternoon. Title, Be All You Can Be, Attracting Talent for the 21st Century. I'm Lieutenant General Retired Leslie C. Smith, AUSA's Vice President for Leadership and Education. As your professional association, the Association of the United States Army is proud to provide forums like this one throughout the year that broaden the knowledge base of our Army professionals and those who support our Army. AUSA amplifies the U.S. Army's narrative to audiences inside the Army and help to further the association's missions to be the voice for the Army and support for the soldier. Of course, we cannot do this alone. AUSA relies on its members to help tell the Army story and to support our soldiers and their families. A strong membership base is vitally important for our advocacy efforts in Congress, the Pentagon, and the Defense Industrial Base. Thank you for that continued support. To start off, I'd like to introduce our opening speaker, General Randy George, 41st Chief of Staff of the Army.
Okay, they turn this thing on? All right, I was told that my job here was to tee this all up so you guys had really hard questions for the panel. So I'm going to try to do the best that I can to make sure we're doing that. So I appreciate everybody being here. And I'm just going to start off with telling my own personal story. About 42 years ago, I was in high school and trying to figure out how I was going to get money to go to college. And I talked to a Korean War veteran, and he told me, hey, and spent some time in the military, you should join the Army. Think about joining the Army. It was the best thing that I ever did. He was very successful in my very small and local community, had a big impact on me. And he said, hey, you can do it for 3 years. You might find that you might really like it and you can stay. And everybody see I liked it, so I've stayed. But I say that to everybody that's out here, and I know we've got some of our international partners, and when I've talked to them, everybody I think is dealing with this a little bit. I can tell you that when I'm out there talking to troops, and I've been all around the world here really in this first 60 days, and you go out to formations, and we're retaining great soldiers. They love being in the Army because they love the people and the mission. And I think it's just a great opportunity. So whatever everybody can do, if everybody that leaves here, can everybody raise their hand? Everybody raise their hand. You promise to go out and find somebody. So whatever you can do to help us out. I also want to up front just thank General Brito, General Gervais, our AMO team, and it's good to see you, Tony. Specifically General Davis and all of our recruiters. So a lot of people are going to focus on the fact that we missed a target, and I will tell you that we put a target. We did say, hey, we're going to go for something a little bit larger, but with all the headwinds, we had 55,000 that signed contracts this past year, and I know that's 55,000 that are going to get in an excellent opportunity. They're going to meet some lifelong friends, and I think be fulfilled by what they do by being in the military. What we have done here over the last 90 days, and this is kind of what I want to tee up, is we've been taking a look at how do we need to recruit a little bit differently in today's day and age. And things are different. So when I first came in, back to my original story, I went over to the National Guard Armory, got into a van, drove down to Des Moines, Iowa, took the ASVAB test, got to stay in a hotel. The next day I was walking through, did the medical piece, and I think at noon I was calling my mom and said, Mom, I'm signing up. So it was that quick, and it's different now, and we're dealing with some different things, and we have some, certainly have some headwinds that we have to deal with, and I'm sure you guys are going to talk about that. But what we have, we did about a 90-day study, and we came out with really 5 big areas that we're going to look at. And I'm just going to cover those with you real quick. The first is changing how we prospect. And I read an article about 45 days ago, 60 days ago, it was in the New York Times talking about colleges closing down. There's just less, demographically, there's less kids that age, young adults that are coming out into, whether it's college or coming out into the workforce. We also have a lot of people that go to college and maybe they spend a year in college or 2 years of college and things aren't really right for them. The point is we're looking at how we prospect in the markets that we prospect, and it's not just necessarily in high schools. And the other thing is a lot of people, when you're searching for a job, you're probably, if you're in school or doing other things, you're probably doing that at night or on the evenings. And so just changing how we look and how we approach that is the first. The second is, and I think this is a big one, is we have typically taken recruiters, and they've been right out of our formation, and we have some really good recruiters. But I've been everywhere I've gone to a recruiting battalion, people would tell me, hey, I could tell almost immediately whether somebody was going to be a good, had the skills to be a good recruiter. It's a tough job to figure, to be able to sell those kinds of things. And so very similar, I would describe it as very similar to SOF and how we select the right people. We're going to go after selecting the right people and create an MOS, and it's going to be 42 tangos where we're actually picking the right people, training them, and then keeping them so we're not rotating them all the time, so that they actually understand how to interact in their communities. We can also put them in the right, I think the National Guard does this already. I'm looking out there at Tom Carden. And you may have somebody that has a language skill, knows the area, knows the people, and we can keep them, they can continue to progress, but they're going to be out there where they're actually going to know the environment that they're in and can, I think, be more effective. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to realign the structure. And, this is always tough. Everybody always focused on this, but we're going to, the AUSA rec position will be elevated to a 3-star position, and it's going to be a direct report to me and the secretary. And I'm sure that General Davis has felt like he's been a direct report on several occasions over the last year, because I've called him a bunch, to include this last weekend. He usually gets a Saturday or a Sunday phone call. But the tenure will be for 4 years. And what we're really trying to do when you give missions to commanders, you typically always give them the authorities and the resources that they need at their level to solve those kind of problems. And so we're under that review. Secretary and I have asked for a brief back here on how we are going to implement this, and it will happen after AUSA. And I'm going to personally be involved and help drive in to make sure that we're getting after the change that we need to do that. The other thing that I've noticed in my career is that most of the good ideas actually come from the bottom up. People that are out there actually doing the mission. And oftentimes we get where we put out a solution way up here and tell everybody, okay, that's how we're going to do it all the way down. And we are going to give the flexibility. So first it's the authorities and the funding to General Davis. And we also going to give him the right people inside of his headquarters. So if it's writing contracts, those kinds of things that he's doing, he would have the ability to innovate and do different things. I met a Sergeant First Class up in Albany, and Johnny's heard a whole bunch about, I always bring this Sergeant First Class up with what he was doing and what he was innovating, and I thought if we could just empower those people that are out there doing that, I think he got his whole battalion mission of people who wanted to come into the Army because he was innovating in a way with tech that worked for him, and it was right off the shelf. And then last is we have to do a better job in the Army of understanding, and this is evidence-based learning, what is working and what isn't. What's working in our marketing in very specific areas, for local marketing, what is the measures of effectiveness of our national level marketing? How effective is it if you give somebody a $30,000 bonus, $35,000 bonus? What is the sensitivity analysis on that? And what we have known, there's a lot of people that join not necessarily for money. They're joining they want to go to this specific location, or they're very interested in an MOS. And we're just going to study that and make sure that we have the analytics behind it as we move forward, that we know what we're doing. So those are the broad outlines. I appreciate everybody being in here. There's no more important topic to our Army right now. And I've laid out, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow with focus areas, but our responsibility to Army is to be experts at war fighting, and be prepared to defend our nation. And we need the right people inside, and the people have always been the strength of our Army. So whatever help you can provide, whatever ideas you guys have today, we appreciate hearing them. And I'm going to step out of the way and let you get after the 4 folks that are up here. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks so much, General George. There are some open seats here. You might have to call over a couple folks, but please occupy those seats as you take a chance. So the United States confronts the pacing challenge of our adversaries. The Army faces the most challenging recruiting landscape since the inception of the all-volunteer force. I had the privilege of serving our Army for over 35 years. Now it's my distinct pleasure to serve as a moderator on behalf of AUSA for this forum. Our forum includes, directly to my left, Lieutenant General retired, not yet, Lieutenant General Douglas Smith. No, you can't go yet, brother. No, I don't. I don't know. Okay. I think you got to serve for 5 more years. Right. He serves as the Army G1's 50th G1 and is responsible for developing, managing, and executing manpower and personnel plans, programs, and policies for the total Army. That means he does it all. His oversight includes the development and implementation of effective policy and lead programs that build sustained personnel readiness. In addition, Doug takes responsibility for execution of our assigned functions and achievement of our mission in support of the Secretary of the Army, Chief of Staff of the Army, and the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower Reserve Affairs. That means he's very busy. Mr. Johnny K. Davis, Commanding General, U.S. Army Recruiting Command and Fort Knox. Major General Davis is currently recruiting for the Army of Tomorrow by enlisting America's best and brightest volunteers into active duty and to the U.S. Army Reserves today. He leads and trains more than 8,000 recruiters worldwide, tasked with the Army's recruiting mission, providing with the tools necessary to execute this function. And finally, Dr. Brian Grippentraub, Vice President, Force March. Brian leads Force March research, advisors, and communicators, tackling one of today's most challenging public health, security, and social challenges. His impact includes building safer, more enriching military workplaces, increasing uptake of COVID-19 vaccines in vulnerable populations, reducing youth tobacco use, and increasing voting access to American citizens. Join me in a round of applause for our panelists. We'll kick off our forum with opening comments from our panelists, then we move to question and answers. Be thinking of those questions and answers too, just the questions part. Let's start with Doug.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my honor, my pleasure to be here to talk and sit on this panel today. Looking forward to your questions. I guess I've got about 90 minutes before I retire for the second time today. But if you know something I don't know,
I don't know anything.
Feel free to pass along to the audience at home. You told me we were going to start out, but you did not start out with your story of service.
Yeah, but I'm the panelist.
Okay. All right.
So I'm going to come back to me after you guys do yours.
Okay. So we did rehearse it that way, but anyhow.
Who's the moderator?
So I was growing up in a small town in upstate New York. My mom and dad were born in Canada. They're both Canadian citizens. My grandfather and my uncle served in the British Army in World War I. And my mother and my father participated while going to high school in Canada with their version of JROTC. My father moved across the river, started teaching high school, and was a guidance counselor in a very small town in rural upstate New York. He looked at me and said, "Hey, if you want to go to college," I will use the air quotes, an aspiring athlete at the time. And there was more aspiration than athlete in those quotes. And he said, "Hey man, like, athletics is not your thing, but if you like being on a team, if you like being a part of something bigger than yourselves, this is something that I would encourage you to do." And he said, "Apply for an ROTC scholarship." I did. He said, "Do your 4 years and come back." And I started out kind of thinking about the mission but I fell in love with the people that I serve with. And I'd do this job for free, and I'd sign up the day after I retire and do it for free. Thank you.
Well, I guess it's over to me, and sir, yeah, that's what we rehearsed.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, I'm Johnny Davis, and I'm the Commanding General of United States Army Recruiting Command. I've been in the job about a year. Took over right before AUSA last year. Came from Cadet Command. I was born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Born in St. Joseph Hospital. It's going to be important because another panelist member and I are very connected. But that being said, my grandfather was a World War II vet. I spent a lot of time with him growing up on Palmer Street, north side of Milwaukee. He spent a lot of time sharing his Army story with me. He departed for the European theater in 1942 and did not come home until the war was over. And so that was a big, to the family. He was very inspiring to all of us. And again, I was born, if you think about the time, I was born in 1968. And so my parents, it was the height of a lot of things going on in the country. And of course, my father was a high school teacher at Riverside High School. He started there in 1969 and went on and served as a high school teacher for the next 40 years at the same high school. So I moved on to college. Of course, we had another brother and sister. It was hard to make ends meet. I think my dad's salary as a Milwaukee public school teacher back in those days was, I think, $5,000 a year. And so that was very tough. So, of course, there wasn't a lot of savings in order to support us in our pursuit of a college degree. So, of course, I received a brochure in the mail from, this small school in New Mexico to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and that's what I did. I jumped on a plane and I flew all the way across the country to attend New Mexico Military Institute because, you know what, they offered to pay for school.
Yeah.
And that was a value proposition I was all in on. So that was my journey, return to Wisconsin, join the Wisconsin National Guard to finish schooling, and then in early 90s, applied for active duty, and I came on active duty. I've been here ever since. So it is a great opportunity to be here, share my Army story, and connect with each and every one of you as we continue to, select the next, Johnny Davises out there who are around the nation and help them lead us into the future. So with that, thanks.
All right, I'll go next. So I'll be honest, I'm, as a civilian, being asked that question in our rehearsal, coming after these stories, I was a little kind of daunted. In fact, no one's ever asked me my Army story. So I paused, and then kind of thought about my grandparents, and that's kind of where the story for me starts, which is two grandfathers, both served in World War II. Reinhard Griepenschrog was a German immigrant, and he enlisted at the ripe age of 36. And as the story goes, the services sent him back to get a handwritten approval from Elsie Griepenschrog, his wife at the time, with kids, to get commitment before sending him over to theater. So that's a little bit of my grandparents. Now, my dad, and this is where a little connection starts here. My dad and our family grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I was born at St. Joseph's Hospital. My father was a Milwaukee public school teacher. I know, it's crazy.
That's crazy.
And then went to night school and became an educational psychologist. So I think for me, that's kind of how do I blend those two together? It really is. It's a little bit of that narrative of the Army, and then blending the psychological science. And ultimately, for my career, it has been military organizational psychology, focused on preparedness and readiness, and a lot of the issues that we have of folks coming in and staying within the Army. So for me, it's been a great honor in my career to be this. This is kind of like the one continuous thread of research that I've had throughout 25 years. And for the past 3 years, I've got to work directly with the Army, directly with AMO, directly with Team DDB. and just really proud and honored to be here today. Thank you.
That's good, thanks. So Doug done counsel me later. I'm already gonna pay for this. I'll probably have to buy him lunch or something. My dad died when I was 5, but we knew that he was a Korean War veteran. And so my father's brothers and sisters served in the World War II and the Korean War, and one in Vietnam on my mom's side. So I knew some type of service was something I was going to do, but I didn't realize it was going to be 36 years of that. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about. And so it continues with my family. My brother and sister serve, and my youngest daughter now is on a Howard University Army ROTC scholarship to be a doctor. Woo! So I'm happy for that. So I don't have to pay for it. So let's jump into the questions. Let's start with Dr. G. So Forest March has conducted research that influenced the modern brand and marketing strategy. Can you give us some insight on how the research you conducted informed the Army Enterprise Marketing Officer's marketing strategy, and what have we learned?
Yes. So I think I'll start off with that, and we'll probably hear it a lot today, that term possibilities. And that's kind of the framework for a lot of what we'll talk about in terms of the creative execution, some of the tactics. But ultimately, if we backtrack a number of years, we've developed a large evidence base around this idea of possibilities. And ultimately what that means is when we talk about this idea of what is this journey to adulthood, this emergence of adulthood, what are young adults looking for? And then ultimately, where do they see the Army in that journey? And that was kind of our starting point, and I'm not going to get into a lot of the types of research. We talk about the stakeholders that were involved in that, prospects, influencers, veterans. We talk about the types, qualitative and quantitative in surveys, and all that fun stuff. But ultimately, we wanted to get at what does that mean? And we kind of came upon what was within possibilities, P2C2, purpose, passion, community, and connection. Those were the aspirations that young adults said that they needed on their journey to adulthood, and frankly, that they were not really seeing that connection with the Army as it stood today. And so that's really kind of the, what I'll say is that framework for possibilities. Now, if we want to kind of make that a little bit more concrete, we can talk about something like the be all you can be tagline, right? So that is and was tested kind of a tournament style with hundreds of other taglines that could be kind of strategically, we thought, representative of this idea of possibilities and this P2C2. And ultimately, across all these stakeholders and a number of criteria that we would say would make a strong tagline and be representative of P2C2 and possibilities, that was the winning candidate. And that's why we now are represented in that be all you can be tagline. So that idea of both kind of strategic decision-making up front in terms of any of those tactics, as well as that continuous evaluation that we talked about. Does it work? Those are hallmarks of the AMO research program and something that is continuing to be done today.
Okay, good, thank you. So let me pull the thread a little bit for that. You talked about purpose, passion, communication, and connection?
Community.
Communicating and connection. So how is that helpful in the development of Be All You Can Be? How did that come together?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll go back to some of that early research that,
okay.
As we talk about those concepts of purpose, passion, I'll keep repeating it so everyone does that P2C2, purpose, passion, community, and connection, right? And it is mostly 16 to 28-year-olds. That was kind of our focus in that time, and ask them what were those things that were most important to you in your emergence to adulthood, and then trying to kind of get what do you see today the Army delivering, and looking at those gaps, and then trying to identify which of those are achievable and can be owned by the Army. And I think that's a really important distinction here, which is, are there some of those that are uniquely Army, and that Army senior leadership, veterans would also gravitate towards and say, yes, I can communicate that and support that.
Okay, that's good, thanks. Johnny, you know, as the brand and marketing strategy have changed, what have you done in Recruiting Command across the enterprise this year?
Well, I would add that this, first of all, the synergy and this connection with the brand rollout has also been able to help us align both our marketing with the needs of our recruiters. So now we're starting to see all of the efforts, both from marketing, our retraining, what we've done to invest in our recruiters, and then educating them on this brand, because I think that connection that the doctor referred to is very important. I've been able to speak with so many young high schoolers, college, labor force. I talk to the UPS or Amazon delivery drivers all the time about the connection. I always ask, help educate me. I'm sitting here, I've been in uniform for so many years. I just want to understand from your perspective. And they're very, supportive. They trust the military. But I think that there's a relatability and awareness thing that is missing as to what they believe occurs in the Army. There's a lot of perceptions out there. There's still a lot of, infantry, armor, combat arms, when in fact, with the number of MOSs, I mean, we need cyber warriors, UAS pilots, and the whole gamut of MOSs. So really, that connection piece is so very important. I think that's where all of you play a role in, because I don't know if many of the labor force and those in school understand what we truly, truly do for this nation each and every day. And I think that's, you make a good point, and I thought I wanted to highlight that. But I'll tell you, everything that we've done in this command is really the feedback provided by these recruiters. Mm-hmm. It has allowed us to really move resources and invest in their needs. And so, example, Soldier Referral Program was a recruiter, recommended initiative. The Recruiter Performance Incentive Program was a recruiter, recommended incentive. So all of these things, and when the recruiting force sees that investment in them, then there's this surge of energy to get out there and do more in terms of our prospecting, processing, and future soldier management. So all of these things play a part, but it goes back to the connection and the alignment and synchronization of both our marketing and what we're trying to connect in terms of touching propensity across the nation, and then what our recruiters do on the ground at the 1,500 stations. Because recruiting is local. My recruiters in Bangor, Maine, are, they have the same station, same equipment, but they may operate differently in that market compared to my recruiters in Miami or Dallas or Portland or even Hawaii or Guam. So this is something that it plays a big role. But listening to these recruiters and acting on their recommendations, that's what I'm doing. And it's driving, I believe, this positive resurgence across the recruiting force. But it shows that we're so very interdependent on marketing and what we're trying to do on the ground. Thanks.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. So, Doug, as the Army continues to compete in such a fast-paced environment, tell us what you've learned about the recruiting environment and those external studies that have influenced how the Army is transforming the recruiting enterprise.
I think when we started with the team in the middle of May, we wanted to, it is a huge area to look at when we talk about recruiting, and Johnny talked a little bit just a couple minutes ago about, you look at 1,500 stations across America, the amount of people, time, effort, energy, and resources that are vested in our recruiting force, and how all of that works. And one of the first things that we discussed was what can the Army control? Can the Army control propensity? Can the Army control external factors? What is it that the Army can control? And so when we look at that and we look at, here are things that we can do in terms of who we recruit, how we recruit and with whom are we doing our recruiting. And we kind of distilled our study down to that essence, in that the force, the Army, can control those things. And then leveraging teams across the Army, not just looking at the impacts of COVID-19, the impacts of ASVAB scores, the impacts of new additions in the past 2 or 3 years. Let's kind of rewind this tape and go back 25 years and look at about a couple million sets of accessions records compiled over those time frames, looking at the composition of the command. What does all this data point to, and how did that set our frame of reference to move forward as we compiled this study?
Okay, that's good. So, Major General Davis, the Chief talked about it a little bit, but give us a little bit more about those things specifically that the Army is hoping to achieve from the transformation of the Army recruiting enterprise.
Yeah, thanks, sir. As you could, I think all are tracking, the Secretary and the Chief announced this rollout of transformation. There are 5 areas, and each one since that rollout, now this is about 4 or 5 days ago, has been on our minds every single hour as we look at transforming. I mean, this is potentially the biggest change ever to occur in United States Army recruiting in this command's history. So how we prospect. Now, right now, most of our superstar recruiters are in the high school, markets, and rightly so. I mean, they make up a large portion of our enlisted force. But with that shrinking number, we got to really look at, do we need to expand in the labor market? And that's where we're trying to look at potential ways to invest. And I'll tell you, teammates, this is something that we're working through. I know this has been brought up by some of my team members. We really need to, look at a potential full court press in the digital job board market. And some of these I'm not very familiar with until I started to Google and educate myself. Glassdoor, LinkedIn, Indeed, I can go on and on. But these are areas that, we are pursuing to look at in terms of our investment to expand, not just the high schoolers, but absolutely, I want to share my Army story, and I want to make sure that your Amazon or UPS driver joins the United States Army.
Yep.
And that's what I'm working on right now. What's that value proposition we are trying to do? So that one, sir, is important. How our recruiting force, he's absolutely right. When you look at a borrowed force, that means a direct, Department of the Army selected recruiter. Essentially, that is Sergeant Davis, who is, completed his first tour in a unit. He's now on orders to go to the Army Recruiting College for 8 weeks, return home in about 45 days, report for duty at a recruiting station in Appleton, Wisconsin. So this is something that we're working on in terms of once they arrive, is the family ready to operate? Because we want a family and a happy recruiter, because then we know they'll tell the Army story and we'll have a better impact in terms of production. So just when that superstar gets really good, it's about a year and a half later, and then now they're on orders again for the next duty station. So what we have to do is look at, should we professionalize this force a little further, and then have them in that particular neighborhood where they now know every principal, every local official for a little bit longer, and let them crush it in the market. So that's what we're looking at. In terms of the experimentation capability, I really want to know what works and what does not work. And we're doing that now on really in-house with recruiters who are doing 2 jobs. They're recruiting and they're trying to experiment. What we're trying to do is expand that so that I know what works and what does not work. But what I don't want to do is tell a recruiter, hey, you have a mission, and then put this extra requirement on them, and then just adds a level of stress. So this is an area that we're looking at in terms of our experimentation. should it be someone on production or off production, and should it be someone within the command or outside the command? So these are all the questions. Everything's on the table that we're looking at. And then this evidence-based, how we understand, the why. I ask, hey, this is happening in the market, why is that? Well, what I like to do is really invest in the analytical capability of the command, not just so much within the command with Army, let's say AUSAs. I think you should really add additional analytic capability to that. And that could be a rep from Jammers or Army Research Institute, RAND. You should look at all of the superstars who've provided information to us to inform Army level decisions. Well, let's put them at the ground level right now and include them on how we move forward. I think that's so very important. So that is something that we're looking at. But so I'll stop right there. There's a lot going on, and I know General Stitt is working hand in hand with the team. Anything, sir, that I may have missed there?
I think as Johnny's looked at all this, and want to rewind just a little bit, and this was, when we studied this is not an indictment of an individual or an organization. When you walk around the halls here, you see all of this great kit that's in the hands of our warfighters. And as Johnny said, this is the most significant transformation that's happened within recruiting command. Well, we want the best kit in our soldiers' hands to do any mission that they're given. Why can't recruiting command is no different? How do we enable, modernize, and give the best tools, the best training, the best kit, the best resources to our recruiting force to enable them to succeed in the 21st century? And that was kind of one of the other underlying principles within the study. I think that as we look at professionalizing the workforce, that's not, hey, they're not professional now. They're awesome. But as Johnny just indicated, this is a young sergeant that's coming in that has been trained. Right now, the training to be a recruiting sergeant is shorter than everything except for 2 military occupational specialties within the United States Army. So again, how do we modernize and upskill our recruiting force and then show the value to our recruiting force? The chief just said this is our Army's #1 priority. Well, we want to take this career for a recruiter, and as Johnny has indicated, how can we give them some stability, some time to build and coalesce that network on their station, but also give them a clear career path where we are putting them in positions of leadership and authority within the organization so that we are setting the conditions where we are not only catching up to adapt in the 21st century labor market, but we are caught up and we have developed recruiting command into a resilient organization that is able to withstand economic or geopolitical impacts on the labor market.
Okay, that's good. Dr. Ford,
Yeah.
anything to add with that?
Please, because I hear this concept of of trust and this idea of relatability and trust and having our representatives in communities for longer periods of time. It is very important as it pertains to this idea of consideration. Am I considering the Army? And what we tend to find is that these ideas of relatability and trust are lacking. And largely we can think, well, who are they supposed to get this from? Who are they supposed to get information from the Army, from their parents? We can look in 1995, it was 40% of young adults said that they had a parent that served. Last year it was 12%. Wow. About 3 in 4 parents say that they have a conversation with their child about college, about 1 in 4 about the military. It just kind of goes on that how am I to have a conversation with a young person about something I don't know? So the question is, where are they getting that information? What are the trusted resources that are relatable? And frankly, they view a lot of the folks that we see in this room as like that's the end product. And it's discipline and it's courage and it's physicality and it's all these things that are just kind of like a bridge too far. And so that's, to me, as I'm kind of hearing that, is just so darn important of being able to provide information from a trusted source that can be relatable. And those are two big barriers that we're trying to address, and hopefully that's something that really can make some inroads there.
That's good. So great conversation here. Any questions from the floor, please? Go to the mic back there, please, so we can hear you, so we can project. If there's some questions you want to bring up to me, you can bring those too. Yes, ma'am. Tell us who you are and ask away.
Rania, from Egypt, based in Kuwait, have been volunteering with the Association of the United States Army since 2007. And after due thanks to the whole panel, it's an amazing conversation, but I guess my question is to Dr. Brian and the whole panel afterwards, because it just hit me, this purpose, passion, connection, and community. Aren't they the 4 dimensions, or maybe more, for resilience? And I'm just coming from the finance or investment industry, and it's a taboo to say that 60% of the industry suffer one way or another from mental illness. So the token here in the Army is for talent acquisition is, well, I know that you invest a lot amount of budget and efforts in wellness and quality of life. Resilience is part of it. And I delivered myself a resilience program in Camp Arab John last year for one of the units, 120 soldiers. And it's never-ending issue. So I guess the question is how to promote that upfront, that you, while joining, it's just like an amazing, sustainable sort of organization, the Army, and it will take care of you. Because I have seen this being civilian over these like 15 years volunteering, I have seen that's real time, but it's not promoted upfront. I can see that too. So thanks.
Thank you for the question.
Please, you go first, sir.
Sure. So I'll kind of I'll use that language of resilience and maybe put it into some different terminology, which, you know, when we talk about those concepts, they're pretty broad concepts, right? Purpose and passion and community connection. It's like, how is that translated? And sometimes it's translated into some very simple language from our prospects, which is, I could never do that. I'd be putting my life on hold, right? Those are two big ways that Army prospects kind of verbalize this idea of not feeling as though they would be able to get purpose and passion and community connection because there is this either lack of knowledge or what they do have, the knowledge that they do have, is leading them astray in that manner that they feel like they would have to, with their friends from their hometown, that they would be moving forward and I would be moving laterally, right? Or if I look to see an individual in uniform, maybe I look at them and I look at myself and I say, I could not imagine what type of physical challenges that this person gets through, and therefore that in of itself is a big barrier. So anyhow, that's how those kind of like broader constructs kind of like move down into simpler language, and frankly, language that we should be able to address both on the marketing side as well as on the recruiting side, right? It's the full enterprise.
Either one. Go ahead.
Well, thank you for what you're doing, ma'am. Thanks for the question, and appreciate you volunteering. I think in terms of connection, I'll take you back a couple years, and the chief mentioned this when he talked about it, and the secretary talked about it earlier today, about the weight and the construct of our entire Army trying to build these sinews and tendons of connection. A case in point, a couple years ago, the commanding general of 10th Mountain Division hosted a group of educators, teachers, parents, and students to visit that he connected with online and invited them to Fort Drum, New York, and took them around Fort Drum. And you know what kind of, you would expect that the students were a little like, wow, I didn't know this or I didn't know that. But the parents, I didn't know that soldiers could have a house. I didn't know that soldiers had a grocery store on post. I didn't know that they could shop in a store on the installation. I didn't know that a soldier could have a pet. So, when we're starting about making these connections, I think your point is very well taken, but we are very much at the grassroots level. If those are the kind of initial questions that we need to do that General Davis, his recruiters on our entire Army, active guard and reserve are doing on a daily basis to reinstill and reinforce those connections across our communities. Thank you again.
Yeah, if I can add, and thanks, ma'am, and sir, thanks for the comments. So we've learned from these education forums, and again, maybe we assumed that this knowledge was widely spread across the young, the labor market and the high school students. Some of these were very eye-opening questions. The pet, owning a vehicle, or the biggest one that really stuck with me was, I heard that I will not receive my first military paycheck until I graduate both Army Basic and AIT. So 6 months I have to pay on my own. So this is something that we had. So I don't know how that's being transmitted out there, but this is the awareness campaign that we have really focused on over this last year. I was just at the last big educator forum. We bring them all in, from business owners to college presidents, and we get the same questions. We just didn't know.
Yeah.
And so this has been and I'll tell you another area that's really helped us and has really opened my eyes is the civilian aides to the Secretary of the Army and the Army Reserve ambassadors, bringing those who live in the communities as leaders on the recruiting train with us to have the impact. Thank you.
Okay. Sir, please.
Thank you. I'm Major Stewart. I'm a Silicon Valley technologist, and as a reservist, I support our HR command. My question's about the digital experience. A lot of our Gen Zs are making their decisions about their jobs online, and how are we changing the digital recruiting experience for those candidates?
So that is, thanks, that's a great question, and it's been on our mind. I know it's on the Army senior leaders. How do we begin to enter the digital space? I have older, children who are, living, grandkids, they're living their life, but I also have teenagers, and they're they are digital natives in what they do each and every day. So I see that, and now I'm trying to find, okay, this has got to be, we have to find a medium or a way to connect through that. So that's one of our potential experimentation areas of focus, and something that we want to try to look at very quickly. So that's a very good question, and it's certainly on the table.
Okay. Did you have a question, sir? Please.
Hey, good afternoon. Davis Winke, Army Times. Some people in this room may look at some of these organizational chart changes, such as making use of RECA 3-star command, aligning cadet command, and the Army Enterprise Marketing Office underneath it. And I think a lot of us have been around long enough that, hey, this smells kind of like a sessions command, a 3-star command that aligned many of these functions and was inactivated in early 2012. General Sid, I'm curious whether the demise of a sessions command came up during your study group and what the attitudes y'all had in retrospect on that decision to eliminate a sessions command then.
Davis, good afternoon. Good to see you again. Great question. And rank, resources, and authorities. I think the chief nailed it in the introduction. This is not about revisiting the past. How do we align and give recruiting command, if we just talked about that, about transforming this organization, what kind of authorities, what kind of resources, how can we, take the command into the 21st century and set the command up for success? My thoughts.
General Davis, do you have any thoughts?
I'm excited. No. I think it's unity of command. I think it's as the chief and secretary have shared. to align, really the training for our recruiters, our investment in recruiters, the marketing aspect. And again, you got to look at the authorities and the resources. That's so critical. It doesn't matter what, in terms of structure, where, what you build, what you take away, but you got to figure out where the authorities and the resources sit to make, to operationalize as Army senior leader decision. So.
For General Stitt and General Davis, what are some of the ways we can penetrate the college market? Are there ways to lower barriers between USAREC and Cadet Command to gain efficiencies and capitalize on existing relationships?
Yes. I think Johnny and Andy Munera have there's an existing, start with the basics, there's an existing MOU sharing that data and sharing that information. It's a short walk between the USAREC and Cadet Command headquarters, but also, again, with, bringing this new structure into place, you're able to leverage relationships along with aggregating that data. And if you look at how we are trying to, in the transformation of USAREC, none of these kind of 6 things are done in isolation. They're done, kind of in synchronization. And if you look to the first question that came about technology and how we're utilizing that and going out and experimenting and expanding in the prospect market, you're already starting to look at not just folks who are in high school or in college, but folks who are in the labor market, and where are those men and women making their decisions about being in the labor market. So I think that synergy exists, and then we add in the 6 transformational ideas. I think that'll just continue to build upon it.
Okay.
Yeah, hey, sir, so that's a great question. When you think about the college market, and I think, let me expand on the difference. Yes, I came from Cadet Command. I know there's a history between Cadet Command and Recruiting Command in terms of investment in the college market. And I think that's one aspect. 20% of our recruits every year have some college or college degree. But that being said, I think it's more than a college market, and I think it's the community college market, it's the trade schools, it's those who are moved on and are in full-time jobs that are thinking through right now after the first 4 or 5 years, you know what, I'm ready, I'm thinking about a change, and I want to be ready to answer those questions when those come up. So it's much more than the college market. And we have a great relationship between Recruiting Command and Cadet Command. Andy and I are side by side. We're next door neighbors. We talk about this all the time. And both recruiting stations and the colleges is not a problem in terms of access and operation. I want to get outside of the college campus. I want to get into the labor force market and see where we can make an impact.
That's good, thank you. Sir.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Major Myron Bishop. I'm the Deputy G1 for the Michigan Army National Guard. Sort of a looking internal question. Did any of the research provide any insights regarding performance-based incentives for recruiters and whether or not techniques like that are effective?
Yeah, there's a lot of, for example, the recruiter performance incentive, which essentially is every recruiter has a mission every month, and a contract above that, depending on the qualification, can equal either $150 or $75. That has increased. But I think what we're really seeing the incentive is example the soldier referral program and how that's impacting. So when you think about it, up until this point, soldier referral program is essentially if I'm an E1 to E3 and I refer, let's say, a friend, a relative, and they qualify and they ship the basic combat training, then the Army will promote that soldier 1 grade within about 30 days. They're really good. I think HRC and DMPM and headquarters DA folks really got that down packed, where these soldiers are seeing a promotion very, very quickly. That is the highest conversion, and I share this with you, 27,000, and we're almost approaching 1,200 soldier contracts. So all of these different incentives, I think, are having an impact. Now, where the incentives really impact is at the station and company level. And that is, let's say I'm a Louisville, company or a Seattle company, and I ask to share your Army story at multiple high schools. Depending on the number of leads, we may offer, a day off or something along those lines for the recruiters. They love that. And we're seeing some improvements in those areas. But incentives, the lower they are and managed by the leaders, those company commanders, sergeant first class, the station commanders, that's where we're seeing a big increase. But in terms of national level, soldier referral and the recruiter performance incentive, they're all making a difference as well. Yeah.
Got one add to you, and that's a great question. And I think, again, as we're utilizing all kind of 6 items in synchronization, when we talk about our learning capacity and our learning capability, that when we do push, an incentive, that it's not reactionary in nature, that we understand the impacts and effects of it before it goes out, and that we just continue to learn and refine from that. Like Johnny's saying, like, okay, we have the recruiter performance incentive. What data, what information now do we have in place to collect from that so we can adjust and tailor accordingly? And we may try some things going out in the future. They may not work, but we have to understand that we can rapidly prototype, put them on the floor, learn from them, and then move forward. But that's a great question.
That's good. General, yes, sir.
Yes. Good afternoon. A great presentation. I listened to each of your stories, and there was a commonality in those stories. And that commonality was something we called a draft. And the draft provided that community connection because draft boards were all local. And so when you got drafted in your local community. And every one of your stories went through that period. But with the advent of the all-voluntary force, we've lost the draft. We've lost part of that community connection that took us into the communities. The second thing that crossed my mind was that the place where we're getting the recruits has changed. That place has now moved to our urban areas. And those urban areas require a little bit much effort in terms of getting those recruits out. And before, when we were coming up with the old draft, the draft did it, but now you've got to go in those urban areas and you've got to get the recruits out. It's going to take a little more than just a recruiter to do the CC piece of it. It's going to take all of us in this room, every one of us, working to help maintain the community connection. So the real question is, how do we get back out into those communities as an Army institution and help? And there are a series of things that used to go on, and I'm not trying to take us back too far, that caused that connection, but we incrementally killed them. And one I heard earlier in the week was the soldier show. And the soldier show was expensive, so we killed it. I'm not saying it's the soldier show, but it's got to be those kinds of things that connect us back to the communities. And until we get back to the communities, we're not going to get there. So we need to help these recruiters. They need us. They need every one of us. And we've got to get back to the community connection. And absent the draft, I don't know how you get there. So, Mr. Recruiting Commander, we've got a challenge here. And I've raised my hand. I'm willing to help. But we've got to get into the urban areas. That's where the population base is. It's no longer out in the rural areas. Not enough bodies out there. So how do we get inside of those urban areas, CC on the end there. How do we get out there and do this? And I think that's our challenge. That's where the people are, and that's where we need to get the numbers from. Over.
Roger, sir. Thank you. So let's pull that a little bit more. How can the Army best leverage veterans like General Ellis and others to help with the recruiting effort? I mean, we talk a lot, but I'm specifically talking, what can we help you with?
Well, a couple things, and I'll start here.
Yes, sir.
Sure, we got your name. I think you're on the rolls. We'll fire you up here. I don't know about retiree recall, but the DMPM's in the front row, so we'll figure it out. You said it. Let's not be afraid to tell our stories. Those of us who are in uniform, those of us who are out of uniform, all of us has a story that brought us to where we are, and we can't be camera shy about sharing it. Johnny mentioned the leveraging of the civilian aides to the Secretary of the Army. And I think that the Chief and the Secretary have talked and have said that this is not, transformation is not going to happen overnight. And reconnecting with our communities, with all three components, active guard and reserve, actively going out, supporting recruiting events, telling those soldiers, telling their stories. You're right, sir. It is going to take some time to reinstill and rebuild those connections across America, but we need everyone's help. Everyone is a recruiter. If you bring in a recruit, we've got the recruiter badge. It's ready to go. So sign them up. You'll get your badge, but we can use your help.
Okay. Johnny, anything?
Yeah. So I think the veteran, and to me, they are the true influencers as they continue to share their story within their communities. Doesn't matter whether it's, Army, it could be all services, but I would share with everyone, we should not assume that everyone understands what service to this country is in terms of the Army. And I think our veterans who are true influencers need to spread the word a little bit more in terms of what service to the nation, what service to the Army, the camaraderie, it's a life accelerator. It's all of those things. And so that is, and thanks for bringing that up. In terms of recruiter, production, when you think about the nation, of course, over time, the Southeast, again, where most of the bases are, you see a lot of, about 20, that brigade area, so Florida all the way through Louisiana, through North Carolina, is about 20%. Where we're seeing huge growth is moving west. So California, New Mexico, Colorado, all the way out to California, and just south of the New Mexico border, northern border, taking that all the way to the California, northern California. That's where the growth is really happening across the nation. That's where, again, as the population over time, migrates, that is where we're seeing true growth. It's from Midwest and Northeast. It's about the same, but a little bit less over the years. But where we're seeing that explosion is really happening from Texas all the way through Southern Cal, Northern California.
That's good. Gina.
From Army Magazine here at AUSA. The major from the Michigan National Guard talked about performance-based incentives, but I'd like to take you back to something you said, General Davis, about this surge of energy you're feeling among the recruiters as their ideas are adopted. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the other ideas other than the Future Soldier Prep course, which has been hugely successful? What other, maybe smaller, or what else is coming that we don't know about yet? So you can make a little news here if you'd like to.
Well, I will tell you, there is positive energy, and we're seeing it in the positive momentum of the contract or soldiers that we're bringing in by the week. That number is going up slowly. But what I love about it is many of the things that we're seeing from the soldier referral program, I mean, and I'll be honest with you, that's transformational. 10,000 graduates as of today, both from an academic and physical perspective. Is our nation's investment in them. In terms of ASVAB score, it's almost an 18-point increase average. Some are much higher than that, and this is within 2 weeks. It's not, it's trained or it's run by or taught by an outside agency, and it's just really transformational. I would ask everyone to take the time to visit it. That's one. Now, ma'am, I will tell you, we are working on a couple other things right now. I'm not, I don't want to get ahead of, I want to share this with the Army senior leaders, but we are working on a number of things, ladies and gentlemen, that are truly transformational.
Okay, that's good. Please.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Colonel Eli Lozano from the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. Gentlemen, we conduct a lot of analytics within our organization alongside the DoD, specifically looking at trends of assessing and recruiting individuals, waiving certain medical conditions. As we've increased our precision with being more dynamic, such as a future soldier prep course, wondering your thoughts as to really looking at the current medical standards and perhaps establishing a tiered system, because while we would all love our soldiers to have the same health, the same readiness, the truth of the matter is that based on MOS and based on the talent that we need at Echelon, not certain that we need the exact same medical capacity or medical fitness from all our soldiers, and that somewhat is limiting our pool of potential soldiers that absolutely want to serve but may have a medical condition that instead of being rejected, we could limit them into or shape them into a certain number of MOSs to still leverage their talent. Wondering what your thoughts are and if that's something that the military at large could look into to broaden the pool of potential recruits. Thank you.
That's a great question. Working where you do, you understand that the Department of Defense sets the accession standards for entrance into the United States military. So it's a pretty broad working group when you talk about bringing in all the services together and then asking all the services to take a look at not just accession standards but retention standards, how much we're, back-end compensation for disabilities, et cetera. I think that we have to be deliberate and thoughtful and understand, and it goes back, and I apologize to being a learning organization, that we can't just snap the chalk line. We have to work with great teammates like you with longitudinal data and information to lay out the risks and the rewards of saying, okay, understanding this is a condition that is causing a lot of consternation with the sessions, but what does that look like for retention standards 5, 10 years down the road, if that makes sense to you?
Okay. Ma'am, Colonel.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Colonel Chris Sailing, Army Human Resources Command. I'm obviously very interested in the experimental capability that we're talking about rolling out with USAREC, but experiments carry with it two things that the Army has typically not been willing to give: risk and investment. We're going to try a lot of things that don't work. We're going to try a lot of things that are going to teach us things, and we're going to be out there competing for people against the 31+4. How can we help you compellingly say that talk about the narrative of what we're investing in, and that investment is worth making as much as any of our systems?
I think, appreciate the question, Chris, and we'll be, looking for your support as we, like you said, roll this out and be deliberate and thoughtful about it, because we do have data that can inform, we're not just, hey, let's roll the dice and try this. There are, again, some data, some information that set the parameters going out front to say, okay, and then operationalizing it within USAREC to understand, hey, what may sell in Des Moines might not sell in Dallas, and be cognizant of that. So, let's apply it in Des Moines first, before we just kind of subscribe to, well, it worked here, let's just roll it out across the entirety of the command.
Okay, ma'am.
Sorry. Great presentation, sir. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Sharon Wu Nichi. I am from Texas, the proud state of Texas. A statement I would like to make in regards to recruiting is that it really doesn't matter which pathway these potential candidates join the Army. The point is they joined, right? So we don't want to close the door. If they are not a fit for, for like a scholarship, then, we want to make sure that we have we're just a phone call away to USAREC recruiting station and make sure these potential candidates can have a pathway. Eventually, they're all going to get the education they need, but we've got to work together, and that's really, really important in our community. We've lost a lot of continuity when it comes to connections with the school districts, the CTE programs due to COVID. For us as veterans retired in the community with our kids in our school districts, we need the recruiting stations to work with us so we can get them back into school. We've worked really, really hard in the Houston area by doing that through the CASA office. So we want to make sure that we want to continue to educate and then also be that continuity so when recruiters, they rotate in and out in PCS, that they know who to contact so this way we can actually help them, introduce them back into the school as they change commands.
Okay. So there's a lot of questions coming in. So can we talk a little bit about, what do you guys think about mentors for prospects, like veterans mentors to help soldiers think about what it means to be in the Army so they can learn things before they go? Whoever wants to take that one.
Okay. Yes. My thought is that when you talk to recruiters, when you talk to applicants today, many of them have someone who is either beyond a relative and is beyond a recruiter who is kind of saying, hey, go left, go right. But again, it goes back to some of the initial questions that came out of how do we develop our digital platforms? How do we reinforce some of these connections? How, with the work that with Johnny's doing with GoArmy.com to go in there and you can, here's your frequently asked questions, here's, kind of a start point from I admit, from a digital standpoint that you can start to have that conversation and then we can inject, the human in the loop along the way. Okay. But, our great veterans across the community, our CASAs are, leveraged and, every day you get a phone call like, hey, I have an individual that's doing this, or this. How can we help them educate and inform and bring them into the force?
Okay.
So what I would add is, of course, we want the veterans to support, visit their nearest recruiting station, and then we will link you into the Future Soldier Management Program. So that is a recruiter function that every recruiter understands, so that when we contract a future soldier, and they may depart next week, or they may depart next year if they're, let's say, a high school senior, and so we don't see them depart until next summer. So we have to have an active future soldier prep program. Veterans will play a huge role in that, but how we do it now, it's almost like how the other services, and I use this example. Our oldest daughter, had a program where they had to come in and do PT. My second daughter, when she enlisted in the Marine Corps, she was a high school senior, and then she, over the winter through the next summer, she every 2 weeks would have to show up at the recruiting station, and then they either do PT or classes or a lot of different things leading up to their departure date. So, but veterans absolutely can play a huge role in that. Just those who want to be active, it's just a trip down to the nearest recruiting station, and those that are in their future soldier management program or program, they love to connect with you and help. That is what we want to do, is keep that fire going as they continue to march towards their departure day for basic combat training.
Okay, that's good. Mr. Newcomb.
Yes, good afternoon, gentlemen. Dorsey Newcomb from Missouri. You've kind of answered my question in the last several minutes, but I just kind of want to accentuate it a little bit further in this notion of how veterans can assist the Army and strengthen its recruiting efforts going forward. We've talked a little bit about the networking and things like that, but I also think about when you all were up here talking about share your Army story. That phrase itself really sank in with me as I was sitting here thinking about my own Army story. And I think the CASAs are a great tool for the Army, but I think if we had a call to action across all of our veterans and tell them that we want them to share their Army story, and it would be up to the Army to decide how they capture that. I think it could be a little bit risky with some veterans sharing their story. They might get a little bit more than they bargained for with some of our recruits. But if there are vignettes or things that can be captured, I just think that the veterans of our Army understand the national implications on our security and are willing to do their part. And we're talking about wanting to do their part, but how are we putting them on notice, a call to action that we need you now? If I'm in some restaurant or some business and I see a young person that I can strike a conversation up with, I will have that conversation with them. And others do it in different ways, whether it's the apparel they wear, their hats, their shirts, or whatever. But I just think that we need to encourage our veterans to tell our Army story, tell their Army story. And I like the phrase, share your Army story.
Yeah.
They're very compelling. Thank you for
Okay.
A couple of things.
Go ahead.
Just because you asked, Darcy, great question. I think I can plug it. Soldier for Life apparel is now available online and being advertised through Army Echoes. So you can wear your Army story when you're out and about. Also in Army Echoes, if you are want to serve and want to help, military entrance processing stations. We talked about mentorship. You want to go, you want to connect. They're looking for volunteer proctors to come in and administer the ASVAB, and we also sent that out in our last issue of Army Echoes, available online or hard copy.
Okay, that's good. So we have 4 other questions. We're going to hit those quickly, please. Short questions.
Forget it. All right, well, good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Major General Chris Callahan. I serve as the Adjutant General for Rhode Island, and I don't want to get fired asking this question or kicked out, but, and Darcy kind of set the table for me, and so I'll start. Dr. Bryan, maybe you can help us here because it's a little bit delicate, and I want to ask it appropriately. When I am exposed and on social media, using the internet, whatever, maybe I'm on television, there does seem to be a very consistent drumbeat from nonprofit organizations. I'll use an example like the Wounded Warrior Project, and organizations that are doing unbelievable things, very important things for our veterans. Those types of messages seem to outpace any positive or financially, like we put money into recruiting as an example, or any of our messaging. So I guess I'm curious as to your thoughts and the team's thoughts on how we sustain this idea that the Army, whatever compo you decide to serve in, that the Army is a place to accelerate from on the whole, and that the average is very high in terms of how you'll survive on the backside, and maybe you can share your thoughts on that.
Sure. Thank you. No, thank you for the question. I mean, it is right. It's a challenge. I think we acknowledge that at the same time we talk about building connections with purpose and passion and community connection, that there is a risk element, and it's very real when we talk about the biggest barriers that young adults indicate for not having an interest or not considering. There's a large contingent that will bring up physical, mental, emotional risk. And that's what we're talking about. And if I understood your question right, it is when I view those physical, emotional, mental risks, does that strengthen the association between Army and those risks? And I don't have that firsthand research, but right, with some cognitive psychology background, you can kind of say, yeah, that makes sense how that could strengthen the relationship. So they are things that we are constantly addressing by strengthening those elements that say, this is why I want to join, and making sure that we are also having some of the structural elements of for those people that have anxiety and have those association with risk, how are we addressing that as well? So it is kind of a dual answer there.
Okay. Sir, please.
Gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Henry Beeman. I'm the president and CEO of Military Recruiting Solutions. And my question is revolved around, there's a lieutenant who just released a book from the Marine Corps called We Don't Want You, Uncle Sam. And it's talking about connecting with Gen Z, the Zoomers. So what resources are our recruiters that are on the ground asking for to enable them to connect with and message this new generation?
There's a number of they're looking for additional potential authorities depending on their to add Army or marketing items to social media. They're trying to connect. But remember, some of our recruiters are Gen Zers themselves. Many of the large proportion of our younger population. So they know how to connect. Now with that knowledge, they're bringing that forward through us and say, okay, I have recruiters with thousands and thousands of members on either Instagram or some social media, and what we're trying to do is outfit them with the things within the boundaries of our current regulations. But these are all of the areas that we're taking a look at. But from a recruiter standpoint, many of them operate in that space and already have all the platforms and the tools. What they don't have, they certainly have brought to our attention, and that's what we're looking at right now.
Sir.
Gil Sanborn, I'm a civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army in Northern California. What you announced last week was the most exciting change that I've seen in terms of recruiting in the 16 years I've been a CASA. And there were two elements that I thought were critical, changing the term of the leadership to make leadership more strategic and less firefighting, and then also professionalizing down the ranks. So question with respect to what that means in terms of local recruiters, because our problem has always been that population of recruiters is transient. You're in for a couple of years, you're out, you never establish connections with the local community or invest in the community that we need in order to change attitudes. So the question is, how are you handling that? And then as a context for that, with respect to the issue of how we penetrate urban areas, I was approached by the battalion commander saying, we're getting nothing out of Oakland, can you help? I went to the chief of police and I came back with a strategy, but it's going to require 2 years in order to get a return. And so I'm asking for that support from Recruiting Command in markets like this to give us time on a coordinated basis with our ARAs, our local recruiters, all of the actual Army and Guard and active and Army Reserve constituents in the area that we can then look at a community like Oakland and figure out how we penetrate it.
I'll go first. Thanks for the question, sir, and appreciate your service and support. As you indicated, it's going to take some time. It's not like we're going to roll out the first of this new MOS on Monday morning at, for instance, the Oakland recruiting station. But how do we work back through the command and working in concert with USAREC to identify those knowledge, skills, and behaviors? What makes a good recruiter? It might be a Department of the Army selected recruiter who's currently serving. It might be a 79 Romeo. It might be someone who hasn't even come into the force yet. But how do we start to look at that? How do we leverage what's going on in the recruiting and retention school today? How could we leverage maybe some connections external to the Army to, look at how we are growing and selecting that force? So it's not like, it's going to take some time to repopulate, with this permanent recruiting force. And then I think to your second point, sir, once that permanent force is there, absolutely, okay, you've built those connections with the guidance counselors, with the influencers within your local market area. What's the sweet spot that you've developed and matured those relationships, and then, okay, we need to leave you there for maybe a longer period of time to let those relationships continue to set and develop and grow, and then let's consider moving you on potentially to a different assignment.
That's good. So we're running out of time here, which is good. That means the topic is very good. So Dr. G, give us about a minute of closing comments of things you'd like to leave with the audience.
All right, 1 minute. So I think one of the things to note here is that we've heard a lot in the press, and we talk a lot about these headwinds, very real, and they make it clear as to we work in an environment that there's a lot of things that we do not control. We didn't talk a lot about those today, which I think was actually pretty productive. We focus on things that we could control. And I think ultimately that idea, and we've talked a lot about it, which is kind of like working with evidence, not working with anecdote, that is going to march us forward. And I think that's really productive. With regard to the campaign that kicked off in the spring, Be All You Can Be, I think that there's some early evidence that this kind of framework of possibilities as manifest in Be All You Can Be has gotten young adults' attention. It's earned their attention, it's earned their awareness. And I believe that as we start to talk about what are the other things that we want to communicate, that we want to tell the Army story, we have their attention right now and need to capitalize on it. So I'm very encouraged by this panel, by the discussion of the things that we have under our control. Honored to be a part of this mission, and thank you very much for your attendance today.
General Davis.
Well, thanks, sir, and thanks everyone for the opportunity to share my thoughts. This is very exciting. As I said, I've been in the Army a long time, and being part of this transformation is truly historic. What I really, and I'd ask for everyone's help in here, is to, based on this transformation, help me operationalize it for the entire United States Army. And that's from our veterans, that's from those that are not inside the command, like I said, Army Research Institute, Jammers, RAND, you name it, all of these superstars, because these are big decisions that will impact the Army for years to come, and we want to get it right sooner rather than later, and areas that we should take a look at in terms of experimentation. But as you can tell, this is a very super exciting time for all of us as we look at this professionalizing this recruiter force. I've talked to recruiters. There's some excitement there in terms of all of the areas that the Secretary and the Chief outlined, and that's what's, to me, that's most exciting. So again, thanks a lot for the opportunity to share.
Good. General Stitt.
Thank you all. Appreciate your participation. It's exciting to be a part of our Army's newest startup venture, which is the Transformation and Recruiting Command. And I think if we all get behind it with passion and enthusiasm and taking this on as a no-fail Army mission, we will certainly be successful today, tomorrow, and into the future for our Army of the 21st century. Thank you all.
That's good. Join me in a round of applause for our panelists. This concludes our first CMF. We will be talking about this in the future.